Ready? Here we go.
Different points of view and highs and lows. A new perspective everywhere you go. Open up your mind, drown out the noise, and see if this connected. And see if this connected.
What's up, fam? The mission of this Connected podcast is to connect generations and situations about faith, life, and whatever comes along the way. To not necessarily agree, but be listened to. These conversations, of course, highlight the perspective of our various guests, and you are always welcome to agree or even disagree. But as always, we hope that it is done in charity. Now, here's your host, Catholic.Dad.
Thank you, Tony, for that awesome introduction. And thank you, Tony and Bethany, for doing that takeover. On this episode, fam, this next episode, we have a treat for you. We have a spiritual director who's coming on to share with us a story from her book and what spiritual direction is about. So I want to introduce to you, fam, our special guest, thanking her in advance for coming on the show. Her name is Carrell Jamilano, and Carrell is a spiritual director and renowned speaker. She has led youth and young adult ministries, as well as many other things. She's a captivating storyteller. She co-hosts Woman, Strong Faith, True Beauty for Shalom World TV, and has appeared on other programs produced by Catholic TV Network. Her writings have been published with Liguorian, Life Teen International, and The Upper Room. Carrell received her master's degree in Pastoral Theology at St. Joseph's College of Maine. We're so happy she came on, and let's welcome our guest, fam, Carrell. Welcome to the show, Carrell.
Tell us, again, you became a youth minister in 2011, and what happened? Like, why did you, how long were you a youth minister, and where did that lead to?
Sure. I was a youth minister for 6 years, and I absolutely loved it. And during that time when I was a youth minister, that was when my first spiritual director came to me and said, Carrell, would you be my spiritual director? At that time, I've only been a youth minister for 1 year. And so, or actually even barely a year. And I had my own spiritual director. And at that time, I just thought, I'm not worthy to be a spiritual director. I just became a youth minister. I'm still trying to learn that. And I just didn't feel enough. I didn't feel worthy to take that role on. And so I remembered talking to my own spiritual director and asking her and saying like, hey, this young lady seems to think that I could be a spiritual director for her. Can you please tell her that she's wrong? And maybe can you be the one to be her spiritual director? And I literally told this young lady like, oh, just talk to my spiritual director. She's the real one. And so my spiritual director ended up telling me, Carrell, the reason why they chose you is because they saw that you had the gift, the gift to lead others in their life of faith and prayer. And so I encourage you to say yes. And so I did say yes. And that experience was just so powerful for me. And I just felt like it fit who I was, fit the gifts that God blessed me with. That I ended up pursuing more formation in spiritual direction by gaining my master's in Pastoral Theology, and then after receiving supervision in my work of spiritual direction. And so that is the path. I think the common thread of my vocational journey in ministry has been God using other people to say, hey, you should do this. And opening up my eyes to realize that could be a pathway where God was leading me.
Wow. Now, we've always, as youth ministers, we've always had young people who come up to us and ask for advice or seek advice. And there are many youth ministers who feel uncomfortable with giving advice because, you know, what if I guide them the wrong way, and there's such young people, and as you said, am I worthy to even do that? And in my time, I always deferred, you know, well, let's make an appointment with Father, and let's guide you that way. Now, that was me. And I think that's what most youth ministers do, is they guide them to the priest and say, okay, well, this is a little too much for me. Let me guide you. And that's not wrong. But can you tell us, what is spiritual direction?
Sure. Well, spiritual direction, the textbook phrase is, it's accompanying another person, another soul, in their life of prayer and faith, in their journey towards God, in their spiritual journey. And how I would like to break that up is by giving you an example that hopefully is a little bit more tangible. So the difference between regular advice giving, therapy versus spiritual direction is this. You know, a couple or maybe a woman comes up to you and says, you know, Arnell, I'm having a hard time in my marriage because, you know, my husband and I are fighting all the time and I don't know what to do. What should I do? And so that person is really seeking some sort of therapeutic skills to kind of help with their communication issues between them and their husband. Now, a person that is seeking spiritual direction, it's another layer. So the woman would come to you and say, you know, Carrell, I'm having a hard time with my husband. I don't know what God is calling me to do. And that last phrase is really the key in spiritual direction. Everything that a spiritual directee brings up in spiritual direction is all about their relationship with God. And so, yes, they may be talking about certain life situations. They may be talking about struggles that they're having, but it's all in the context of, how is this affecting my life of prayer? How is this affecting my relationship with God? How is this affecting the way I live out my faith? And that is what spiritual direction is. And so people normally come to me for spiritual direction when they're discerning something. Maybe it's a vocation, to married life, to religious life, to single life. And sometimes they are asking for help and guidance because they're discerning, you know, what career God is calling them to, how they can best use their gifts to serve God. Other times they may be struggling in prayer. Maybe they're experiencing a lot of dryness in prayer, or various other types of struggles like boredom or busyness. And they're trying to understand how they can live this life of prayer that we're all called to do. And then there's other directees that will come because they have specific difficulties in their life, and they're trying to understand how God is working in and through that. And so those are normally the things that I often hear about when people come to me for spiritual direction. And hopefully by hearing those examples, that can kind of give you a better picture of what spiritual direction is all about.
That's a beautiful answer. And the follow-up question to that is, when a person goes for spiritual direction, is it one of those where are you going to accompany them with, you know, 1 session, 3 sessions? Is it a forever thing? Because the priest that I walk with, you know, it's like, you know, we communicate all the time. And so,
wow.
so how is it? Is it formal? Is it informal? And how often, you know, those kind of questions, how often do I see the spiritual director?
Yes. Well, I would say that spiritual direction is normally more formal because it is specifically about you and your relationship with God. And so when we are talking to our friends, it's casual, right? So we're just talking about our day, what's happening, what's what's bothering us, and so on. And we'll go off in tangents. We'll talk about movies. And so, that's what I define as casual. When I say formal, it's more of we have a set goal in our meetings. And that goal and that for those sessions is really about their spiritual life. And so I would say formal in that sense that there is a specific goal that we're trying to journey with. As for how many times, I always tell my spiritual directees to pray about how spiritual direction meetings have affected them, how helpful they are, if they're getting a benefit from it, as well as how much they feel, how many meetings would best benefit them. And so I never tell spiritual directees, like, you have to meet X amount of times, or you have to, set an appointment however many times within a certain amount. It's really about them and their spiritual life. And so they may come to spiritual direction and they realize, this really wasn't for me. I didn't feel that this was helpful, and that's okay. But there's other directees who may say, oh, this really benefited me. I was at a place where I feel like I needed that extra guidance, and that extra guidance helped me through this difficult time. And so it's really about the spiritual directee and their specific needs. And that is what often I would share with them, is to pray about how often is helpful for them.
Thank you for that. What a beautiful answer. Now, on follow-up with that, because this is a question that came up from someone who I always ask listeners, what do you want me to ask? And this person asked, well, how young can a directee be, or how old?
Oh, how old can a directee be?
Yeah, how old, how young can you be, and how old can you be?
Yes. I don't actually have an age limit. I think it's more about what your spiritual, where you are in your spiritual life, to me, is more important than your age. The reason why I share that is because a young person can benefit from spiritual direction if they have the language, if they're able to express where they are in their spiritual life, if they can express, these are the things that are helping me in my life, in my spiritual life, these are not, this is where I'm struggling with my relationship with God. If they can actually share those terms and those, and describe what their spiritual life is like, then they are more than welcome to be able to have a spiritual director or to benefit from a spiritual director. Whereas a person who still don't know who God is in their life, or they're still new in their faith, still new in their prayer, maybe they don't really know how to express their spiritual life, that may be difficult for them, because in order for you to actually have a fruitful spiritual direction meeting, you have to be able to put into terms what is going on in your spiritual life. I'm not sure if that's a confusing answer, but that's what I would share is, are you able to share about how you pray, and maybe the obstacles that are occurring while you pray? Do you have a relationship with God to talk about? Because some people, they're still very new. They're still trying to learn about the sacraments. They're still trying to learn about God and what God means and how that relates to them. And so it's really important that they're able to express verbally what their life of prayer is like, so that the spiritual director can help guide them. Because without that language, it's very difficult.
So a person who is in high school has the maturity, the spiritual maturity, would benefit from from spiritual direction if they so choose.
Mm-hmm. I think so.
Okay. You heard that answer. Hopefully it's sufficient. If not, you will have to contact Carrell yourself. We're going to give your information later. But you wrote a book, and I bought that book. It's called Alluring Voice of God, Forming Daily Encounters. I want to start it when right at the introduction. It is so captivating. I mean, you captured me at the introduction when you literally said the things that most people who do religious education and youth ministry and deal with core team members who move on and, where are they now? And you said, and I highlighted this in your book, that sadly, I'm not surprised, like me, numerous Catholics have been catechized through years of sacramental preparation. And this is what I highlighted. But once they complete these programs, far too many leave the knowledge about God, but little understanding of how to develop a personal relationship with him. I love that quote because that started piqued my curiosity. But what I wanted to say is this. I had a person who came up to me, and literally I had to take note of this, because when you said here, it said, the overall numbers, though alarming, reveal that what Catholics seek the most, a deeper connection to God. They yearn to see his face, hear his voice, and feel his presence in their everyday lives. And when they lack that means to do so, they leave. It is not enough to know facts about God. And I was like blown away by that, because I had a young man who came up to me and said, Mr. Arnell, I know all this stuff about God. I don't know what to do with it. It's, I can answer people about our faith, but what do I do with it? And it's like, wow, you hit it right there, the nail on the head, what they yearn for, And that question when you were talking about when you had the story of when you were a confirmand at one time, and a substitute catechist came and asked you that question. I didn't highlight that part, but it's basically what's your relationship with God, or something like that. What do you say to people who are having that moment where, just like the young man asked me, I have all this information, I learned it, I went to 2 years of confirmation, and what do I do with it? I mean, what are we lacking in catechesis that a majority of the people go through, and just like in youth ministry, they're on fire, and then 3 years from now we're like, wah, 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 where are they? I mean, what can we do? I mean, what are the things? I'm not asking you for the solution, but maybe a discussion on that point is, are we doing enough, and are we missing the mark when we do sacramental formation?
Yes, I think that's such a beautiful question to ask. And it's always good for ministers of the faith to constantly pray about what more is God calling us to do to enrich the faith lives of those that we serve. And it's the reason why I felt called to write this book, was because I saw a need for helping our youth, our young adults, and even adults, because sometimes parents will also share the same things, of how can I grow in intimacy with God? How can I use this knowledge that I have about God to build a relationship with him? Because when we think about God in our life of faith and our Catholic faith, the disciples and the apostles, they didn't say, yep, I'm going to join this church because, the knowledge that I have about our faith. They connected directly to Jesus. You know, they befriended him. And then they ended up journeying with him. They laughed with him. They cried with him. They walked with him. They fished with him. They slept near him. They were traveling with them. And so they had a personal relationship with Christ. And because of that personal relationship, it imbued their whole entire lives were turned upside down into a point where that knowledge of who Jesus was and that intimate relationship with him became something that transformed the world. And so what do we do about this knowledge that we have? Well, we have to also remind ourselves that our faith is not just about those facts, but it's about building that connection with God, because that's the only way we can really transform and what does St. Catherine say? Light the world on fire. You know, that's what it is. And so what I would encourage pastors, ministry leaders to do is in their programming, find opportunities to help them learn about how do we connect with God better. And that's why this book, the book that you mentioned, The Alluring Voice of God, Forming Daily Encounters, it comes with a leader's guide. So that way, any type of ministry leader who wishes to help them form that relationship with can incorporate the material throughout their time meeting with their youth and young adults. And so, and if it's not this book, it's really just making sure you're intentional. Okay, I taught them about these sacraments. I taught them about, various of the reasons why we believe in the Trinity. Have I taken the time throughout every single session in my confirmation class or in this ministry group to talk about their prayer life? To even just ask the question, how is your prayer life? I remember going to confirmation and I loved, my teachers, but I don't think, for me personally, I don't think we talked about that enough. What is your prayer life like? How did God speak to you today? How do you hear God speaking to you? Those questions are often so foreign. I remember doing these confirmation exit interviews. And I remembered asking some of these students, I was helping the confirmation coordinator at that time with these interviews. And I would ask them, it's like, how does God speak to you? And a lot of them would just be like, I don't know. I don't know what you mean by that. And so how are we expecting these wonderful, beautiful youth to really continue on in their faith if they still have yet to understand how to relate to God, how to communicate with him, how to speak to him, and how to listen? And so that is the reason why that's what inspired me to write The Alluring Voice of God, to kind of fill that need and help ministry leaders incorporate this material so that they can grow in that relationship with him.
And Carrell, it's a beautiful book. I especially love the flow of the book. When people hear you speak and they get to know you, you're so gentle. And that's the way that I was like reading the book. I was like, it is so gently written. It's not one of those, it's, oh my gosh, it's like, how sometimes you read some books and they're really heavy. I'm not saying that it's not heavy. There's a lot of content here, but it gently takes you from station to station, from that introduction to that chapter 2, inviting God into every part of your life. I had to read that twice because, a lot of us have a hard time inviting God into every part of our life. We always fall into, again, when you do those confirmation exit interviews, have you invited God into your, I have a statue, or, I have my rosary. I make the sign of the cross. Isn't that inviting God into my life? But what I really appreciated with this is at the very end, there's this part that says, for practice and reflection, and there's these 2 or 3 simple questions. And I told you earlier before we started recording the podcast that I'm incorporating this into my confirmation class to journal at the end of the class these specific questions, and creating some questions of my own. But these questions, like, for practice, it's guided, and it's, and I'm like, I'm doing this. And I think that's what's so beautiful about your book, is it guides you to that point where, wow, I'm actually learning to, and I'm old and I'm relearning the things of, maybe I need to work a little bit more. Maybe I've become a little jaded or overly used to my routine. And I change it up. Because as you get older, I was catechized in the 70s and 80s. What's your relationship with Jesus? Well, at 9 p.m. I pray my rosary, and 6 a.m. I pray my rosary, and try to get to daily mass, and that's pretty much it. But again, that question: have you been talking to God? It's like, what are you talking about? Talking to God? I talk to God. I pray, 2 rosaries a day. I'm talking to Him. I'm reading my Bible. I'm talking. And then when you got to this point, it says, are you listening? I'm like, it's like, well, I listen to podcasts. They're talking about God. Isn't that it? And I think that's, I'm getting to is, I think that's where we get stuck in our Catholic faith journey, is we become fans. I see a lot of, Catholic fans there, but, are they really followers? But tell us how you came up with that idea of, at the very end of each chapter, there's this practice and reflection. It's like I, with me, I try to get through a book, and this one, it was like, oh, she's making me pause. Like, so what I did was I read a chapter a day, and then it became my daily. And I just wish that you had more chapters, so they like 365 days with Carrell.
Yes. I'm so happy that you found the utility and the fruitfulness of the 4 practice and reflection, because when I was thinking about writing this book and how to write it, I wanted to make sure that I not only told people how to hear God and how to, develop this relationship with Him, but I wanted to give them tools. Like, I wanted them so that the person who doesn't know anything about prayer can say, okay, I have some guidance here from this author that I can follow along and practice. And so that's really what it came out to be, is that I really wanted to make sure that it was tangible, that a person who not only read the words could actually say, okay, now this is what she means by it, because she's giving me step-by-step instructions. Try this. Have you thought of this? Try that. Because that's really what happens in my spiritual direction meetings, right? When you see a spiritual director, they not only listen to you and the things that are going on in your life, but they also give you some sort of guidance, hopefully, to help you in your life of faith. So they may say, oh, Arnell, you discussed that you're having difficulties incorporating prayer because of your busy schedule. You have, several kids, and you have a wonderful wife, and you have this podcast, and you have this, and this. And so the spiritual director hopefully will say, okay, Arnell, have you tried this? Maybe try incorporating prayer like this. And so I was thinking about, how can I give that guidance without specifically being there in person? And so that's how, for practice and reflection, that segment ended up coming to be, is trying to envision myself as a reader and what they might need to help them understand what I was trying to say. So yeah.
It is amazing. And then you got to that point where it's like God speaks, and that became my daily. It's like God speaks in silence. God speaks in dryness. And so when you get to these chapters where God's speaking to you, again, as some of the young people and some of our young adult listeners, we're always speaking, we're always praying, we're always talking to God. But a lot of us have that hard time. And that was the very first chapter when you said God speaks, and it's like God speaks in silence. You're like, that's hard for us, because we're constantly taught our prayers. We're taught to be vocal. We're taught to sing to the Lord in praise. We're taught to praise, but we're not readily as equally taught to listen in silence. And we're almost afraid to sit in silence, because we fall asleep. It's like am I allowed to fall asleep? That's always my funny story when I'm caught in the Blessed Sacrament sleeping, and someone says, some of the youth say, "You fell asleep in there." It's like, no, it was the Holy Spirit. But yeah, I found myself being so enmeshed and so exhausted in prayer that my quiet place and my time is just to be silent. But what does it mean to listen in silence, to listen to God speaking to you in silence?
Sure. So in that chapter, how God speaks through silence, I often like to share a story of how I held my newborn daughter, in my arms for the first time. Because there she was in my arms, just looking at me and in awe of the world around her. And there I was looking back at her in awe of the wonder that she is, the precious soul that she was. And when I think of silence in relation to that story and God is looking at us like a new mom, because I was a new mom. He's looking at us with wonder, with awe, with love. And when we return that gaze and look back at him, in that silence, we are saying, I'm here, I'm ready, I'm attentive, I'm listening. And so silence is so important, because it's not just, some people think when you say you have to be silent is that you're just doing nothing, right? You're just sitting in silence, doing nothing. But what I mean by silence is listening. When we're talking, so you and I, Arnell, are having this conversation, right? Right now you are silent, but you're not doing, it's not that you're doing nothing. You're listening to me. You're listening to me speak. And so silence when it comes to prayer is, God, I'm listening. I'm looking at you. I'm attentive. I'm waiting for you to speak to me. And so it's a posture of readiness. It's a posture of attentiveness. It's a posture of, I'm ready to remember that you are God and I'm here to serve and I'm here to be your instrument. So I'm here waiting and listening for you. And so in that chapter, I talk about how silence is an opportunity for you to reflect about how God may be speaking to you, maybe through a scripture that you read, maybe through a homily you just heard, maybe you spoke to your best friend, youth minister Arnell, and he said something really touching, and maybe God is calling you to listen and to reflect on how he may be speaking to you through you, or through that scripture verse, or through that, that spiritual podcast you're listening to. But it takes silence, because if you're talking all the time, you won't have that time to actually pay attention to what God may be saying to you. You need that silence to think and to reflect and to pray.
Intentional attentiveness. It's beautiful how you explain it, how gentle you explain that. And that resonates throughout the entire book. And I cannot recommend enough for people, fam, to purchase this book, to utilize it. And even as I'm going to, and I haven't even asked my faith formation coordinator if I can do that, but we're going to do it anyways, how to incorporate it into your class, because there is such a need in our catechetical ministries to take a step back and teach the young people how to pray and not just recite rote prayers, but how to actually literally have that relationship with our Lord. So Carrell, I know that your time is precious because you have that young one. But after this book, what's next for you? Is there a part 2?
In every year of my ministry, whatever it may be, whether it's youth ministry, spiritual direction, speaking, or whatever it is that God is calling me to do at that time, I'm always asking, God, are you calling me here for another year? Is this where you need me now? Is there a better way to use the gifts you have blessed me with? And so, I'm praying about it, and at least for right now, I feel like God is calling me to continue on with my spiritual direction ministry, because that's where my heart and soul and my the gifts that I feel He's blessed me with is. I just absolutely love being able to accompany others in their spiritual journey. Will there be a part 2? I have no idea, so I guess you'll have to stay tuned. I've been working a lot on music as well. And so I have no idea where God is calling me as to, writing, whether God is calling me to write another book. But I do know that He's calling me to speak more and to continue on with my spiritual direction ministry.
That's beautiful. And we look forward to that, because you are such a beautiful person with so many gifts. And I'm just not talking about AJ. I'm not talking about your baby. Like your own gifts that most of us who are untalented, you can sing, you can write, you can speak well. You put the rest of us to shame. But the beauty of you is that you offer it back and you bless others with your gifts. You don't say, hey, they're mine, and keep it to yourself, but you are actually blessing all of us, living out that thing we say, living out joy, Jesus first, others second, and me third. And it's beautiful. You are one of the people that I look up to, even though that you are way younger than me, okay, aging myself. But you and your husband, AJ, have been such on fire Catholics, Christians, to go out there and really share the wealth of the gifts that the Lord has blessed you with. And I thank you for coming on the show. Fam, because I messed up and producer Tony's going to kill me again, Carrell is a spiritual director and renowned speaker. Carrell has led youth and young adult ministries as well. She's a captivating storyteller, and she's a co-host of Woman Strong Faith, True Beauty for Shalom World TV, and has appeared on other programs produced by Catholic TV Network. I just want to recommend her book, and it's you guys have to purchase it. It's going to be amazing for you to actually do what I did and read it one chapter a day and live out the reflection, put it in your journal, because that's what I did, and I highly recommend it because it's actually super cool. And to read back of what you wrote in your journal on the reflection of what she did, it's called Alluring Voice of God, Forming Daily Encounters. And when I saw that title, Daily Encounters, I'm like, oh, I'll just read a chapter a day. It's my daily encounter. And thank you for guiding me through the book, through that process. And I'm actually rereading it because, you always miss something. Because the first round, I was so busy highlighting portions of it that I'm going to read it again all the way through. By the way, is there an audio version of this book?
I have no idea. I'll have to ask my publisher, Liguorian, but I don't think so.
Oh,
not that I know. They haven't told me about that.
This would be beautiful with your voice doing an audio version of this, because I'm one of those that, you know, when you're driving to work, I like listening to audiobooks. And you have that voice to literally read through this.
Well, I'll definitely think about it for sure.
Definitely do it, because then I'll have to buy the audiobook as well. Do you have any parting words for us, Carrell?
I think I do. One of my hopes and dreams for this book is that readers and listeners of your podcast will remember how much and how greatly God loves them. Oftentimes, my spiritual directees will ask me, Carrell, I feel like God is not listening to me. Or, Carrell, this is happening to me in my life, and I don't know why it's happening to me. And so remember somewhere in the middle of our meeting, I talked to you about being a new mom and how I held my daughter in my arms. Well, when I held my daughter in my arms, and I remember AJ and I were just in awe of everything Marilyn did. So she would be blinking and we would say, oh my gosh, she blinked. This is amazing. Or all of a sudden she's like yawning. And I'm like, AJ, did you see? She just yawned. Oh my goodness. And it was getting so ridiculous to the point of all of a sudden we smelled something really gross, really disgusting. And I'm like, oh, AJ, is it what we think it is? He's like, yeah, it's her first poop. High five. We're throwing confetti, you know, we're drinking champagne. We're like, yes, she did it. And the reason why I share this is because this is how God views us. We captivate him because he is enamored by us. He loves us so deeply. Just like my husband and I were just in love and enthralled by everything that Marilyn did and responding to every single thing every single cry she ever gave. That's how God responds to us. Anytime we ask for help, anytime we are struggling, anytime we do not hear him, God is saying, I'm right here. I'm holding you. I'm looking at you. I'm in awe of you, and I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to make sure that every need that you ever have, I will fulfill. And so that is my, departing words for your viewers and your listeners, is that to remember that anytime we are encountering struggles in our prayer or even in our life, to remember that God is looking at us like a new mom, a new parent, because of undying love for each and every one of us. And so that's my hope for this book, is that they recognize it and embrace that truth so they can set that world on fire.
Awesome. So if some of our listeners want to
Thank you so much for having me.
For spiritual direction, how can they get a hold of you?
Oh, yes. They can get a hold of me through my website. It's catholicspiritualdirector.com. And so that has all of my blogs, has the links to my books. It has my music if they care to listen, and ways to schedule an appointment for spiritual direction.
So that's catholicspiritualdirection.com.
Oh, actually, it's catholicspiritualdirector, TOR.com.
Correction. catholicspiritualdirector, TOR.com. catholicspiritualdirector.com. And everything that you need to find out about Carrell, her blogs, her music, her books, it's all on there. How to make an appointment, get on it, because it looks like you guys are going to have a waiting list. But amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Carrell. You have blessed us many times over with your presence, with your beautiful smile, and with your wonderful stories. You guys, I got to tell you, read the book. And, I'm not saying you have to do it my way. The way that I read the book is one chapter a day. You can probably, if you want to read one chapter a week and really do that reflection, that's what worked for me. That's my recommendation. It worked for me to do it that way. There have been books that I could have read this book straight through because it was so interesting, but I wanted to intentionally read it and actually do the reflections. And it was so, so helpful. So, fam, if you want to do that, again, the name of the book is The Alluring Voice of God, Forming Daily Encounters by Carrell Jamilano. Just go to her website as well, which is CatholicSpiritualDirector.com. So on that note, fam, that's all we have for you all. I wish we could just continue on. And it's like, because I could talk forever with you. But anyways, I hope you'll tune in the next time. I hope that our discussion today connected with you. If you have any questions, comments, or anything like that, send it to our email at catholic.dad50@gmail.com. And please, subscribe and rate us on our podcast. But most importantly, remember, live a life of holiness. We'll be praying for you. Please pray for us. And most importantly, be blessed and be third.
Different points of view and highs and lows, a new perspective everywhere you go. Open up your mind and drown out the noise of different generations of new girls and boys. So sit back and relax, this Catholic podcast. Don't overreact if the thoughts are abstract. When it's hosted by Catholic.Dad, who knows what's gonna happen?
Hey, what's up, fam?
Different points of view and highs and lows, a new perspective everywhere you go. Open up your mind and drown out the noise and see if this connected.
What's up, fam? To connect generations and situations about faith, life, and whatever comes along the way.
Expect runaway thoughts like a runaway train. Break into conversation like links of a chain. Make a Hail Mary pass, hope this connects. Have a question for a guest, put it to rest. Live a life of holiness, lead by example. Follow at Catholic.Dad and be tangled. Christ leads our way, he's the good shepherd. Pray for one another, be blessed and be third. Different points of view and highs and lows, a new perspective everywhere you go. Open up your mind and drown out the noise and see if this connected.
See you in the next episode. That's it. Carrell, you are awesome.
Oh, so are you, Arnell?
I'm so sorry I screwed that up. Tony, I am so sorry. We're still recording this. This is my apology. Arnell always ruins it. But I tell you, it's